Hi there, I'm Selena. You know, most families celebrate birthdays with cake and candles. Mine put me and my 7-year-old son up for sale for $20,000. Yeah, you heard that right. On her birthday, my own sister auctioned us off like we were nothing but property. But what hurts more isn't that night. It's everything they did before that. They took my home. They stole my father's will. They tried to take my son away. And the worst part? They almost made me believe I deserved it. But what they didn't know is how far I was willing to go to protect my son. The grand ballroom at the Fairmont shimmered under chandeliers, laughter bouncing off marble walls, thick with perfume and polite pretense. Everyone here belonged, except me. I stood by the entrance, smoothing the wrinkles from my borrowed navy dress, my fingers wrapped around Caleb's small hand. My son glanced up at me, wide-eyed. "Mom, why is everyone looking at us like that?" he whispered. "Because we're different," I said, forcing a smile. We moved quietly along the wall, past clusters of designer gowns and sharp suits. Whispers followed us. Judgment, mockery. It wasn't new. At the front table, my mother, Vivian, sat straight-backed and flawless. She didn't look at me. No smile, no nod. I shouldn't have expected one. I couldn't remember the last time she looked at me with pride. Maybe when I was 10. A server passed with a tray of champagne. I waved him off. I couldn't afford to lose composure tonight. Not in front of Caleb. The music faded. Delilah, my younger sister, strutted onto the stage. The golden child, dressed in a champagne-colored gown like it was made for her. The crowd clapped. "Thank you all for coming," she purred. "It's not every day a girl turns 34 and looks this fabulous." Laughter rippled around us, hollow and practiced. Caleb shifted beside me, tugging his too small jacket. "Can we go home soon?" "Just a little longer," I murmured. Delilah lifted her glass. "Before dessert, I have a special surprise." My stomach tightened. "Since we're all about giving back tonight," she smiled sweetly, "I thought it would be fun to hold a charity auction. And guess who's up for grabs?" She turned toward me, her smile sharp. "Me and my darling sister Selena, and her adorable son." The room burst into shocked laughter, murmurs and cameras. Someone in the back shouted, "I'll throw in $100 for the kid's dimples!" The crowd howled. I froze. Caleb's fingers dug into mine, shaking. His face crumpled, confused, scared. I thought of last Thanksgiving, when we ate alone while they posted photos of a lavish dinner, without us. Of Christmas mornings when Caleb asked why Grandma never sent a gift. Vivian and Delilah had spent years making me feel small. But tonight, as they laughed and snapped photos, something inside me shifted. Not like glass breaking, but like a lock clicking open. If they thought they could sell me and my son tonight, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The night outside was thick with silence when I unlocked the door to our apartment in South Austin. Only the distant hum of traffic slipped through the cracked window panes. Caleb walked in without a word, his small shoulders hunched like he was carrying the whole night on his back. He didn't look at me, just headed straight to his room and quietly shut the door. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that closed door, my chest tight. My purse hung from my arm, the party invitation still crumpled at the bottom. I pulled it out, smoothing the creases like I could erase what happened tonight. But no matter how flat I made it, I could still hear their laughter. The auction. My own sister putting me and my son up for sale. I tossed the invitation onto the table and walked into the kitchen. The light above felt cold. I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, but didn't drink. My phone vibrated in my bag. I already knew what it was. A post from Delilah Rayner. A glossy photo of her at the party captioned, "Charity starts at home. Sometimes you have to clean house." The comments flooded in. "Such a queen." "Selena's so bitter." "That poor kid." I scrolled past them, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't new. Delilah always knew how to humiliate me. Last year, it wasn't a party. It was a photo of me and Caleb on her feed, me in my cafe uniform, hair messy, walking him home from school. Her caption, "Support struggling single moms, here's Exhibit A." The text poured in after. "Are you okay? Need money?" They didn't know she was mocking me. I tried to shake the memory, but another one crept in. The letter from Caleb's school. I walked to the drawer by the fridge and pulled it out. The paper was soft from how many times I'd folded and unfolded it. It was from Vivian. She'd written the board herself, claimed I was unstable, said I wasn't fit to raise a child. She convinced them to revoke Caleb's scholarship, the one shot he had at a better future. I could still see his face the day I told him he couldn't go back. He didn't cry. He just folded up the acceptance letter and said, "It's okay, Mom. Maybe next time." I folded the school's letter again, but it felt heavier now, weighted with years of betrayal. In the kitchen mirror, I caught my reflection. Tired eyes, tight jaw, shoulders heavy with every insult, every cut. For years I thought if I stayed quiet, worked hard, raised Caleb right, they'd finally see me. But tonight proved something else. They didn't want to see me. They wanted me broken. I leaned on the counter, pressing my palms flat until the ache in my chest sharpened into something clearer. "They want me to break," I whispered, "but they've forgotten how much I've survived." The sunlight creeping through the blinds felt cold. It only made the weight from last night heavier. I moved quietly through the apartment, careful not to wake Caleb, not that he was really sleeping. He sat at the small table, crayon in hand, scratching at paper without much effort. At the stove, I stirred oatmeal we didn't want. The silence pressed on me. When I set the bowl in front of him, he mumbled, "Thanks, Mom," without looking up. That thank you cut deeper than it should have. For a while the only sound was the scrape of his spoon, then soft, "Mom, why does Aunt Delilah hate us so much?" I froze. His small face was drawn tight with confusion. "It's not about you, baby," I said quietly. "It's about them." He nodded like he understood, but I knew he couldn't. He was 7. He shouldn't have to carry this. As I cleared the table, my mind drifted, back to when the cracks first showed. We were still in East Austin then, living in the old Rayner house. It wasn't much, but it was home. Until the letter, taped to the front door on a Tuesday afternoon. A legal notice. Vivian and Delilah had sold the house without telling me. I had 2 weeks to leave. When I called my mother, demanding why, her voice was sharp and cold. "You've been living on borrowed time, Selena. Be grateful we let you stay that long." 2 weeks. That was all I was worth to them. I remembered Caleb sitting among boxes asking, "Why don't Grandma and Auntie want us here?" What was I supposed to say? That they'd tossed us aside like trash? We packed up our lives and landed here, in this cramped apartment that never felt like home. I shook off the memory, but the bitterness lingered. Caleb's crayon stopped moving. "Mom," he said quietly, "when Grandma visited my school, was she telling the truth?" My stomach dropped. When was this? "A couple months ago, at lunch. She said, you made everyone hate you, that you ruined everything." The words punched the air from my lungs. No one told me she'd been near him. No teacher, no call. She hadn't just humiliated me. She'd gone after him. "She said you're why we don't have a family anymore." In his eyes, I saw it. A small crack, a seed of doubt. I knelt beside him, taking his hands. "None of that is true," I said firmly. "None of this is your fault, and it's not mine either." He nodded, but I knew the question still lingered. When he finally shuffled back to his room, closing the door behind him, something in me hardened. They weren't just trying to tear me down anymore. They wanted to break him, and I wasn't going to let them. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, letting the silence settle before I whispered to the empty kitchen. "If they want a war, I'll show them how a mother fights." 2 weeks had passed, but the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. Each morning felt heavier, each night a battlefield in my head. But today felt different. I stood outside the tall glass doors of Graham Weston's law office, the Texas sun glaring off the polished windows. The city bustled around me, but inside, I was still and sharp. When I stepped in, the cool air smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Graham was already waiting behind his desk, suit crisp, expression serious. "Selena," he greeted, "come in. I think it's time you knew what they've been hiding." I sat down, my hands tight in my lap. "Whatever it is," I said quietly, "I'm ready." He slid a thick folder across the desk. I opened it, skimming the pages until his voice broke the silence. "Your mother and sister," he said, "have filed a petition to void your father's will." My stomach twisted. On what grounds? They're claiming Arthur Rayner was mentally unfit, that he was manipulated, that you coerced him. The lie hit like a slap. My father wasn't weak, I said. They know that. Graham nodded. They're trying to block you and Caleb from inheriting everything. Anger rose in me, hot and sharp. But then he added, what they don't know is that your father prepared a second will. The real one. I'm the executor. I stared at him. What? He nodded. Arthur left 85% of the estate to you and Caleb, including control of Rayner Realty. My throat tightened. Why didn't he tell me? He wanted to protect you. He knew what your mother and sister were capable of. I looked down at the papers, the weight of them sinking in. It wasn't about money. It was about the one person who'd quietly believed in me. For a moment, I saw my father again, teaching me how to balance a checkbook at the kitchen table. His voice in my ear. You're stronger than you know. Even after death, he was still fighting for me. I drew in a breath, steadying myself. So, what's our next move? Graham met my eyes. We can challenge their petition. We have the real will, but it'll get ugly. I nodded. I don't care if it's messy. I want you to send them a formal notice. He raised a brow. A notice? Yes, I said. Tell them I'm done being their victim. If they don't back off, I'll take everything they've stolen, publicly and legally. For the first time, Graham smiled. Understood. As I stood, I glanced out the window at the city moving below. They've crossed every line, I murmured. I'll draw the last one. A month passed. A month of silence, but I knew better than to trust it. So when the invitation landed in my inbox, an elegant PDF dressed in gold script, I didn't flinch. The Rayner Foundation Charity Gala, supporting single mothers across Texas, signed by Delilah Rayner, a slap in the face disguised as kindness. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked RSVP. If she wanted me there, I'd show up on my terms. The night of the gala, I stood outside the Austin Museum of Arts, adjusting the strap of my black dress. It wasn't designer, but it fit better than anything Delilah owned, because I didn't need a label to stand tall. Inside, the grand hall glittered with lights and fake smiles. Waiters moved between crowds, champagne flutes in hand. The same faces who'd whispered behind my back for years were all here. And at the center of it all, Delilah. She stood on stage, laughing like she ran the world. When her eyes met mine, her smile tightened, daring me to react. I kept mine polite, neutral, but I was already 10 steps ahead. The music faded as she took the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, she began sweetly, tonight is about giving back, about lifting those less fortunate, those who made poor choices. Laughter rippled through the room. Beside me, Graham leaned in. You don't have to stay. I shook my head. I'm not going anywhere. Delilah's voice dripped with sugar and venom. Single mothers face many struggles. Sometimes, those struggles come from within, from poor decisions, from unstable behavior. The crowd chuckled, eyes flicking toward me. And tonight, she smiled, we want to help people like my sister, to prove even the broken can be saved. More laughter. My pulse roared in my ears, but I waited. When the Kwanda opened, I raised my hand. Her smile flickered. Ah, my sister, a question? I took the mic, voice calm. I think it's great we're here to talk about charity, I said. But charity isn't a game. It's not about who can humiliate their family the loudest. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You can raise all the money you want, Delilah, I added, meeting her eyes. But real charity would be leaving your family alone. Silence. Her smile slipped, just enough for me to see the fury behind it. I handed back the mic and walked out. Outside, the night air felt lighter. Graham joined me on the steps. You know she won't stop now. I nodded. Good, I said quietly, because neither will I. I looked back at the glittering hall behind me. They thought tonight was the fight. It was only the beginning. 2 weeks after the gala, the storm I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Not with a knock, but with 2 thick envelopes shoved under my door. One signed by Vivienne, the other by Delilah. I sat at the kitchen table, my heart pounding as I read. Vivienne was petitioning to void my father's will, accusing me of manipulating him when he was weak. Delilah's envelope was worse. She was filing for full custody of Caleb. My hands trembled, but I pressed the papers flat, forcing myself to breathe. Of course they came for me together. The next day, I sat across from Graham, the documents spread between us like a war map. "Your mother claims your father wasn't of sound mind when he signed the will," he said quietly. "They're accusing you of coercion." I let out a bitter laugh. "She's rewriting history. Classic." Graham slid the second petition toward me. "Delilah wants custody of Caleb. She's submitted records, doctored messages, trying to paint you as unstable." My jaw tightened. "She doesn't want him. She just wants to win." He nodded. "This isn't about Caleb. It's about power." The next week blurred. A storm of court filings, affidavits, emergency hearings. My bank accounts were frozen. My name smeared across headlines. "Unstable heiress under investigation." It all came to a head at Austin Family Court, under cold lights and colder stares. Delilah stood across the hallway when I arrived, red lipstick sharp as a blade. "Nice of you to show up," she said sweetly. "The judge won't like what he sees." I met her gaze. "You're not here for Caleb. You're here because you can't stand that I won't break." Her smile faltered. "Everyone breaks eventually." Inside, her lawyer ripped me apart, painting me unfit, unstable, irresponsible. Lies stacked like bricks around me. When court adjourned, Graham and I stepped into the hot afternoon air. "They're not backing down," he said. "They want to leave you with nothing." I nodded, stomach churning. Then we stopped playing nice. That night, after Caleb had fallen asleep, small and safe under his blanket, I stood by his door and made a promise. "No more mercy," I whispered to the dark. "You'll never be their pawn again." 2 weeks into the custody hearing, I sat at the kitchen table, nursing cold coffee, when my phone rang. It was Graham. "You need to come to the office," he said. "Now." The urgency in his voice made my stomach drop. 40 minutes later, I walked into his office and froze. Carter Blake, my father's oldest friend, a man I hadn't seen in over a decade. He looked older, thinner, but his sharp eyes hadn't changed. "You should sit down," Carter said quietly. Graham slid a thick folder toward me, but Carter spoke first. "I've stayed quiet too long," he began. "But watching what Vivian and Delilah are doing to you, I can't anymore." My pulse quickened as Carter laid out the truth. Years ago, Vivian and Delilah had isolated my father, cutting him off from friends, allies, even me. They controlled his meetings, his money, every interaction. They fed him lies until he believed I didn't care. "They made sure Arthur thought you abandoned him," Carter said. He handed me proof, financial records, emails, statements. The paper trail was clear: manipulation, coercion, betrayal. They hadn't just cut me from the will. They'd erased me from his life. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Graham's voice broke through. "We can use this, in court and in the public eye." I closed the folder carefully, like it might break. "Then let's use it all." The next day, Carter's sworn testimony was filed, but I wanted more. I gave an interview. Just one clear statement: I will not let lies rewrite my father's story or my son's future. It provoked them, just like I knew it would. That evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Delilah had gone live everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Her tear-streaked face filled the screen, her voice trembling. "My sister's trying to steal everything our father built," she cried. "She manipulated him when he was dying. She's tearing our family apart for money." The video went viral. The comments poured in. "Greedy witch. Poor Delilah. She's always been the better sister." I turned off my phone. Minutes later, Graham called. "You okay?" I stared out at the dark Austin skyline, the weight of it all pressing on me. "They've lit the match," I said softly. "Let's burn down their lies." The last Friday of June, Austin was already sweltering when I arrived at Travis County Family Court. The Texas sun glared against the courthouse windows, but it wasn't the heat that made my skin prickle. The courthouse steps were a circus. Reporters crowded the entrance, microphones shoved forward like weapons, cameras flashing. I ignored them. Graham walked beside me, steady as ever, and Caleb held my hand tightly. His small fingers curled around mine like a lifeline. Behind us, I could hear the hurried click of heels. Vivian arrived first, cold and composed. Delilah followed minutes later, her usual swagger absent, sunglasses covering her face. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavier than the weight of all the eyes watching us. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. After thorough review of submitted evidence, including the original testament of Arthur Rayner, financial records, and sworn testimony from Carter Blake, the judge began, voice even but firm. This court finds no credible basis to invalidate Mr. Rayner's will. A murmur ran through the crowd. My pulse thundered in my ears. The court further finds, the judge continued, that deliberate attempts were made to manipulate Mr. Rayner's estate and alienate Miss Selina Rayner from her rightful inheritance. I glanced at Vivian, whose jaw was tight, lips pressed into a thin line. The court upholds Arthur Rayner's last will and testament, the judge finished. Selina Rayner and her son Caleb Rayner are the legal heirs of the Rayner estate and company assets. The relief that washed over me wasn't sweet. It was sharp, edged with the bitterness of everything it cost to get here. Before I could exhale, the judge shifted papers and continued. Regarding the custody petition submitted by Miss Delilah Rayner, he said, the court finds the petition not only baseless, but malicious. Delilah sat frozen, her face draining of color. The evidence presented demonstrates an intentional effort to undermine Miss Selina Rayner's ability to parent her son. Such behavior constitutes psychological harassment. My throat tightened. The judge looked directly at me. Miss Rayner, he said gently, you are the only parent this boy needs. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders eased. The gavel came down like thunder, final and irreversible. Outside the courtroom, Graham handed Vivian's attorney a formal notice. Accounts frozen, restitution owed. Delilah stood a few feet away, her sunglasses now gone, eyes red-rimmed but not from tears. She approached quietly. Selina, can we talk? I met her gaze, but there was nothing left to say, not after everything. You already said enough, I replied, and so did the court. I turned away before she could answer, walking toward the exit where Caleb waited. The media's shouting followed us outside, but I didn't care. The only voice I heard was my son's as he took my hand. Mom, he asked softly, does this mean it's over? I gave his hand a small squeeze. For now. The September sun streamed through the tall windows of my new office, warm and gentle. For the first time in years, the light didn't feel harsh. It felt earned. On my desk sat a simple plaque, CEO Selina Rayner. Beside it, a silver frame held a photo of Caleb, grinning wide, a front tooth missing, his tiny baseball glove in hand. I traced the edge of the frame and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 3 months had passed since the court battle ended. 3 months since the noise, headlines, and betrayals faded. But some heaviness remained, not like chains, but like old bruises you forget about until you touch them. Outside my door, my assistant's voice came through. Selina, they're here. I stood, smoothing my navy blazer. Vivian and Delilah waited in the conference room. They didn't look like the women I once knew. Vivian's hair had thinned, streaked with gray. She wore plain clothes now, no pearls or designer labels. Delilah sat stiffly beside her, eyes hollow, lips tight, the shine of her curated life gone. The room was quiet when I walked in. Vivian spoke first. Selina, I know we don't deserve to be here. Her voice cracked, but there was no pretense. I'm sorry. Delilah glanced up, her eyes wet but guarded. I didn't realize how far we'd gone until there was nothing left. Once I would have wanted to scream at them, rage at what they'd done. Instead, I sat down and spoke evenly. I can't forget what you did. I won't pretend it never happened. They nodded. But I can choose to let go of the anger. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents securing Vivian modest housing and financial support. Enough to live without fear, but nothing more. There's one condition, I said. You will not contact Caleb, not until he decides he wants to see you. Vivian swallowed hard. Delilah wiped at her eyes. We understand, Vivian said quietly. When they left, Graham stepped in with paperwork in hand. That was generous, he said. It wasn't for them, I replied. It was for me. That night, I sat at the edge of Caleb's bed. He was half asleep, face soft under the nightlight. "Mom," he mumbled, "are we safe now?" I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "We've always been safe," I whispered, "because we have each other." Outside, the moon stretched across the Austin skyline. For the first time in a long while, I let myself believe in something simple: peace. Before we end, let me leave you with this, because if you've followed this story, you deserve more than just an ending. For years, I believed family meant staying quiet, shrinking myself, hoping they'd finally see me. But sometimes, the people who should love you most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. This isn't just a story about betrayal or courtrooms. It's about knowing your worth when others try to strip it away. It's about teaching your children and yourself that you are not for sale. Your voice, your future, your dignity belong to you. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever fought a battle no one else saw? Had to choose between silence and standing tall? If this story spoke to you, drop a or comment, "I'm standing strong" below, and tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, tell me why. Your voice matters here. Hit subscribe if you want more stories that remind you of your own strength.